A simple woman stepped out of a modest black car. Her outfit was plain, a simple beige dress, low heels, no jewelry. She adjusted the small strap of her purse and took a deep breath, her face calm but composed. Most people didn't notice her at first, not until she walked toward the entrance of the grand charity gala, where luxury and appearance defined status. Inside, the chandeliers sparkled like stars, their reflections dancing off the marble floors and crystal glasses. Guests moved with elegance, draped in designer gowns and sharp tuxedos. The room buzzed with soft laughter, clinking glasses, and the polished notes of a live string quartet. It was a world made for those who lived in abundance, or at least looked like they did. As she approached the main doors, a few heads turned. Some looked with curiosity, others with thinly veiled amusement. Her shoes, while spotless, weren't designer. Her dress, though ironed and carefully chosen, lacked a luxury label. Her posture, however, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, didn't reflect someone unsure of her place. A man at the door, tall, well-groomed, dressed in a black suit with an earpiece, stepped forward quickly and blocked her path. "Staff entrance is around the side," he said without hesitation. His tone neutral but dismissive. He hadn't asked a question. He had made a judgment. The woman didn't argue. She simply paused. Her hands remained loosely clasped in front of her, her eyes meeting his without flinching. "I'm here for the event," she said softly, her voice gentle but clear. The man looked her over once more, brows tightening as he considered her words. After a moment's hesitation, and likely only to avoid a scene, he stepped aside and let her pass. She moved forward slowly, not in hesitation but in reflection. Her gaze swept across the room, the extravagant floral displays, the glint of diamonds, the air of effortless luxury. But there was something about her walk, quiet, deliberate, that suggested she'd seen rooms like this before, maybe from the sidelines. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't lost. She was there on purpose. She was Margaret. And though no one knew her name yet, they would. She walked toward the ballroom entrance, her steps quiet but steady. The hall was glowing with golden chandeliers, velvet carpets, and soft classical music playing in the background. Around her, elegantly dressed guests posed for photos, laughing with glasses of champagne in hand. Their shoes sparkled, their gowns shimmered. It was the kind of night where appearance meant everything. But Margaret wore simplicity like a second skin. Her beige dress, short-sleeved and cleanly pressed, wasn't designer. Her shoes were practical. She didn't wear perfume, and her makeup was subtle, just enough to highlight the calm confidence in her eyes. She reached the door, but before she could step further, a man in a black tuxedo with a name tag stopped her. His eyes scanned her from head to toe. "Excuse me, miss," he said with polite authority. "The staff entrance is around the side." Margaret blinked, confused. "I'm here as a guest," she said gently. The man raised an eyebrow. "For the charity event?" he asked, glancing at her simple dress again. She nodded. He looked behind her, as if expecting someone else. "And your invitation?" Margaret reached calmly into her clutch and handed him a small card. The man hesitated before taking it. As he checked the list, a group of guests nearby whispered, not very subtly, "Maybe she's kitchen staff who got lost. No one comes to an event like this dressed like that." Margaret heard every word. Her gaze fell slightly, but she didn't turn away. She didn't argue. She didn't explain herself. She simply waited, still and composed. Finally, the man returned her invitation and said, "Apologies. You may enter." She nodded once, then stepped inside. The whispers didn't stop. Eyes followed her across the room, curious, amused, sometimes dismissive. But as Margaret walked deeper into the hall, she carried something they couldn't see: history, strength, the knowledge that she had worked for everything she had, and needed no one's permission to belong. Every step was quiet but firm. She passed the chandeliers. She passed the polished tables and the people sipping champagne. She passed the judgments in their eyes and walked straight toward her purpose. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to change the room. Margaret sat quietly in her small sewing workshop late at night. The warm hum of her vintage sewing machine filled the room, surrounded by rolls of fabric, thread spools, and faded photographs pinned to the corkboard. Her hands moved with grace and memory, stitching not just fabric, but moments from her past. Years ago, this very space was a sanctuary during her most difficult days. She remembered the winters without heating, sewing gloves to give to children in the neighborhood. Not for money, but because no one else would. The wall still held a photo of her younger self, smiling next to a group of barefoot children outside a makeshift community center. It was that smile, that purpose, that carried her through every hardship. Margaret didn't wear diamonds. Her wealth wasn't gold or fame. It was built from hours of compassion, from every piece of clothing she made for someone in need, from every silent moment she chose kindness over recognition. Now, her gaze shifted to a thick folder on the desk beside her. It was the sponsorship contract for the charity gala. Her name, elegantly printed on the front, Margaret L. Collins, sole sponsor. She stared at it for a long time. Not out of pride, but out of reflection. How strange. The same hands that once patched holes in shoes were now signing checks that changed lives. She took a pen and signed, slowly and intentionally. Not as a performance, but as a promise. Behind her, a soft breeze lifted the edge of a curtain. She looked over her shoulder at the framed photo of her late mother, whose handwritten note still hung beside it. We help, not because we have much, but because we know what it's like to have nothing. The city sparkled beyond her small window, unaware that one of its most powerful hearts beat inside this quiet room. Margaret stood up, folded the signed papers, and placed them neatly into an envelope. Her eyes shimmered, not from sadness but from gratitude. She wasn't doing this to be seen. She was doing it because once upon a time, someone believed in her. And now, it was her turn to pass that light forward. The chatter in the grand hall softened as the host walked onto the stage. The orchestra faded into silence. Lights dimmed. Only a spotlight remained, illuminating the man at the center. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, tonight's event would not be possible without the generosity of one extraordinary individual. Someone whose quiet strength and compassion have touched lives far beyond this room. People leaned forward, curious. The man continued. She is not a celebrity nor a billionaire, but her impact is immeasurable. Please welcome tonight's main sponsor, Margaret Collins. Gasps rippled across the crowd. A few people turned their heads, confused. Others widened their eyes in disbelief. That simple woman. The one in the beige dress with no jewelry. It couldn't be. But it was. Margaret stood slowly from her seat in the back row. She didn't rush. She didn't smile nervously. She simply walked, calmly, gracefully, toward the stage. Every eye followed her. She passed the same people who had mocked her earlier. Their faces now flushed with embarrassment. The whispers were gone, replaced by stunned silence. As she reached the stage, the host extended a respectful hand. Margaret took it and stood in the light. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice, though calm, carried across the room. "I didn't come tonight to impress anyone. I came to support a cause I deeply believe in. I've lived a life where appearances were used against me more than once. And I know what it's like to be underestimated." She paused. "But what I've learned is this. True power isn't loud. It's quiet. It shows up when no one's watching, and it keeps going when no one claps." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. "I'm not here to change the world," she added. "Just to remind it, kindness still matters. Dignity still matters." Applause broke out, not polite but powerful. Real. Margaret smiled gently. For the first time that evening, she looked straight into the audience, not with pride but with peace. Because in that moment, she didn't just earn their respect. She reminded them who she had been all along. As Margaret stood backstage, The gentle hum of the gala faded beneath the weight of her thoughts. The speech she was about to give wasn't just about donations or recognition. It was about every moment that had brought her here. Her hands, once calloused from sewing, now held the microphone that would carry her voice into a room full of people who had once overlooked her. She stepped onto the stage, the spotlight soft but steady. The murmurs died down as guests turned toward her. Many didn't recognize her from earlier. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she took a moment, looking out over the crowd, letting silence speak first. "When I arrived tonight," she began, "some of you assumed I didn't belong. And maybe I didn't look the part. But I've learned that belonging isn't about appearance. It's about purpose." Her voice was calm but carried strength. She spoke of building her foundation, not with wealth, but with intention. Of the children she helped. Of the long nights sewing and fundraising, not to be seen, but to serve. She described how years of working in silence taught her more about dignity than any designer gown ever could. The room listened, not out of politeness, but because they were moved. She didn't shame anyone. She didn't point fingers. She simply told her story. A story of struggle, quiet perseverance, and eventually empowerment. The same woman who was nearly turned away at the door now stood as the main sponsor of the evening, and the heart behind its cause. As she finished, the applause didn't come immediately. Came slowly, then all at once. A standing ovation, not for glamour but for grace. People saw her, truly saw her for the first time. Backstage, as she stepped down, a young server approached with misty eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "That was for people like me." Margaret smiled, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "No," she said softly. "It was for all of us." Moments later, a reporter approached, notebook in hand. "What message would you want tonight's audience to take home?" Margaret paused. Then, with a steady voice, she answered, "That every soul has value, and sometimes the most powerful people enter quietly."